Welcome to the tokenmarket.net podcast. I am your host, Gavin Knight. Thank you for tuning in. Check out our site for digital asset research, a calendar of upcoming events, and many future upcoming releases. Our podcast features team members of projects in the cryptocurrency space to help shed light on their developments. Just because a project is on our podcast doesn't mean we recommend investment, so always research and engage wisely. We're here with George K. Van Humison and William Russell, co-founders of the Vega Fund. It's a decentralized fund built on Ethereum to help make it easier to invest in ICOs. So why don't you guys tell us how you got started with Ethereum and started with the project idea here?
Yeah, so I learned about Ethereum probably in mid 2015, and it always was kind of something in the back of my mind and it interests me. But I really got involved probably, I would say, May of 2016 when actually I was working on some CSGO software for skin virtual items in that business, and the need for Ethereum didn't really hit me until, I saw basically what was happening in the CSGO industry with CSGO Lotto, that whole scandal, and Valve getting sued, and T-Mart and Pro Syndicate, just basically lying about who they were and scamming people. And I realized that, like, a lot of this stuff, should be done on Ethereum, and I think a lot of other people realized that, and that's kind of how we got started. And after seeing the DAO and everything, I realized that the idea is great. It was probably just, too soon. And I think we've learned a lot from that. And that's kind of where we got the idea from.
So when you tell us about the benefits of Vega, why would people use it, and how does it make it easier to invest in projects in Ethereum?
So when we were building the idea of Vega from the ground up, the first thing we did was kind of gauge how individuals in this space feel about ICOs and ICO investing and how they view the technologies generally. And what we found was that people in this market are incredibly enthusiastic about technologies, not just from a I can make money standpoint, but also from a genuine desire to promote the growth of this stuff. But a problem that they often face is that, it's not like everyone in the market is rich and has a ton of cash to throw around. So with the large risk that they may be taking investing in ICOs, but they don't have a ton of cash to throw around, they have to choose between having a meaningful impact on a company with their investment or responsibly diversifying their risk. The benefit Vega provides is that by pooling together their money with everyone else who has this problem, and generally all the other individuals in the market, they can properly diversify their risk without sacrificing the impact they're having. Other potential benefits that we hope to provide are, by being a large funding base in the market, we can improve broad market standards for security and legitimacy of projects in general by kind of being a stamp of legitimacy to companies that we invest in.
And how do participants evaluate companies? What do you recommend they do before looking at putting money in or, investing some?
Well, generally, we actually got ripped on this a little bit on Reddit because we provided some really basic metrics in our business plan, which was just meant to provide an overview of this stuff for the person who's actually never even thought about it before. But generally, we just, since we're not in a managerial role, all we can do is suggest, basic stuff like, hey, really look at the team, who's behind it. In this market, it's a big thing to know who the actual person is. George and I have tried very hard to make it clear that we're not hiding anything. We're putting ourselves out there. And so that right there is one of the biggest things we recommend. Okay, who are these people? Are they showing who they are? Do they have proper technical explanations of things, like in their white paper, things like that on a more personal level than maybe potentially a pure metrics level that you might see in traditional VC.
So how does the Vega token work if you do invest or participate in one of the companies? Would you receive a Vega token tagged for that company?
No, not exactly. So the Vega token is just representative of the fund's assets. The fund's assets are a collection of other tokens that are issued by the companies that we invest in. So it's basically representing that you own a portion of the assets in the fund.
And if I'm a Vega holder, will I see returns in Ethereum or returns in maybe more Vega tokens as the progress goes forward with companies?
Yeah, so we've decided that the best thing to do for a fund in this case is to be upfront about the amount of tokens that will be authorized, and say that it's a fixed amount. Uh, and we're actively looking into the best way to do liquidation. But yes, you would receive Ether as a form of return. Um, and we're looking at, should that be at some date, like having a maturity date, or should that be decided on by the community? And these are the types of things that we're asking people, getting opinions on, and discussing what the best method for liquidation would be.
What kind of business structures do you think would use Vega? Ethereum decentralized businesses. Who do you see using this, and can they raise funds in their own ICO and through Vega?
Yeah, well, it doesn't necessarily even have to be decentralized Ethereum businesses that come to Vega for funding. I think that as the ICO market generally expands, that companies that aren't necessarily Ethereum based are going to see the value in fundraising via ICO. And so we're taking on, or we will be able to take on anyone who just does an ICO selling, Ethereum-based tokens as their method of fundraising. Yeah, and for your second part of the question, you don't have to, if you come to Vega and Vega helps fund you, that's not exclusive. That may be we're helping fund a portion of the ICO, or you may be coming to us exclusively, but it's not going to be just like a private deal necessarily.
And do you have any companies that are interested in using this already?
No, we have. I think, we've actually we've been working on this project for a while, obviously, but in terms of name recognition or people knowing about the project, that's just blown up in the last 2-3 weeks. I mean, so before the last 2-3 weeks, we've been rapidly shifting from conceptual and putting everything together and forming a solid foundation to, okay, we're out here, we're developing, and we're starting to make real progress. So no, we haven't had anyone come to us and be like, God, I would love to fund my project through Vega, versus just kind of the general community interest that we've garnered so far.
And what are the terms of the ICO sale? What percent of the coins are you giving away? And how much of the initial capital will be put directly into the fund?
So what we're going to do, our plan as of right now, is to sell 30% of what will be the total token supply in the ICO. And the reason for that is so that we can get an effective base of funds to use, but then ultimately, if the people in the fund decide that more money is needed, they can go up to a certain amount over time. And in the ICO, 100% of the funds collected will go into the fund. There will be no fee structure on the ICO, taking money away from the main purpose.
So if you put 100% of the funds in, how will you fund the future development? Are you in the same boat as the investors, basically the ups and downs?
Yeah, so the way that, because, we and everyone else in this market generally recognizes not that there are no costs to development, but there's not a huge need, especially in this business model, to have a continuous fee structure. So what we want to do is just give the founding team, the development team, however you want to phrase it, a right to some amount of the ICO. That way, we are getting compensation if the project does well and there's demand for it. But it's not just, we're putting it out there. Maybe you buy it, maybe you don't. We're getting paid either way. It's, as the founding team, our skins in the game, we're exposed to the ups and downs just like everyone else is. And if it does well, we do well. If it doesn't, we don't. And that money will be used for further development if needed.
And how do you structure the legal contracts or the decentralized legal contracts with companies in order to engage in Vega?
Yeah, so as of right now, we're building some things similar to like normal. You would see this in angel investing or venture capital, like things like simple agreements for future equity, safes or KISS convertible debt notes, etc. Those are the types of things that we think are really needed in this space. So we'd be setting up kind of those options to use for funding a project. In addition to that, we're a big fan of the Dutch auction format of doing ICOs. We think it's really kind of you get very accurate pricing. So those three are our focus for how companies or projects would be funded.
And are the projects restricted to Ethereum? And have you looked at anything like Rootstock, maybe using Bitcoin as a method of funding?
Yeah, I've looked into Rootstock. I'm a fan of theirs, but I'm much more confident with Ethereum right now. However, I'm certainly not, strictly Ethereum, but Rootstock is something very interesting, and we're looking into that. But as of now, we're trying to focus just on Ethereum, just for initially building, minimum viable product.
So projects would be based directly in Ethereum that you'd be funding.
Yeah. Now that being said, they don't have to necessarily be totally decentralized themselves. But if they're seeking funds from our fund, they're going to have to issue some sort of right that they're doing as a token, so that it's clear that we have ownership over a portion of their company.
And since you're a fund, do you plan to have any real-time reporting on the actual value of the entire fund? So if you're holding different tokens that are tradable, people can see that fund value and also the token value and correlate that?
This is going to be one of the more interesting challenges that we face in development, I think, because if we are offering early fundraising for people issuing tokens, let's say we fund a project in the pre-sale stage and that token's not even going to be minted for 6 months, then that obviously presents a problem for valuation. As far as any clearly liquid token that we hold with a easy to track price, yeah, we definitely want to be able to real time show users how that's going. But we're really working to figure out how we want to price the fund when a lot of the assets may be completely illiquid and without any price at like a current time other than what we paid for it.
And eventually, the tokens, our goal is to be listed on a few of the exchanges. And realistically, hopefully the tokens will trade close to the net asset value of the fund, but they could possibly trade at a premium or a discount, and really that the market will tell what the value of the assets the fund holds is.
And what do you do? So you've collected funds, you've invested in companies, and let's say the company has increased in value or there's some risk. How do you offload that and cycle it back into your original contract? I know, and maybe not everyone listening knows about some of the decentralized exchanges inside of Ethereum. So a lot of assets will be done that way with smart contracts without having to use outside exchanges. But I assume as a fund, you're going to need access at certain points. So are you looking at like, I guess, EtherX or something like that to list tokens and exchange when the fund feels that it's time to reload the coffers?
Yes, exactly. We're looking into Maker Market, and Ether Delta has two options.
Yeah, sorry. There's so many names. Ether
No,
Delta,
I know there's
Ether,
lots.
but yes, Ether Delta, I believe, is Gavin Wood or some bigger people. So maybe you could just give us a brief overview of what that is if someone doesn't know,
Right.
and how you could use that potentially without. I think one big issue with funds that are on a specific chain is, okay, now we have 10% ownership of Monero or whatever, and what we're going to go over to Poloniex or something and convert it. So if it's Ethereum-based projects and there's an Ethereum-based decentralized exchange, I assume you could even create smart contracts and liquidate at a goal over a period of time. So who is going to manage that, and how do you make sure that the fund uh, stays in the fund has enough amount to continue to continue investments.
Yeah. So the way that like for example, if the fund decides collectively that it's wise to liquidate, X token, it can do so by, as of now, we're thinking a liquidation proposal is what we're calling it. And that essentially would call functions on either Maker Market or Ether Delta and basically place an order for that. And as of now, it's not totally realistic to do that in any real volume, just because the these exchanges don't have too much volume. However, if you do it at slightly less than basically what centralized exchanges are selling the token for, if they have that listed, then some arbitrager will come in and lift that order. So that's kind of how it would work. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, of course. Obviously, we need to have a volume on an exchange to absorb sales if there's a large amount. I like the fact that you have a plan to do this inside of Ethereum. Otherwise, you need to create custodial accounts, and you need to have sort of a messy structure that, no offense, I have a belief, don't be evil, can't be evil. It's better if the contract is written well, then you can't be evil and can keep it inside of Ethereum. So I'm going to throw a hardball at you without naming names. How do you feel like you're competitive to the space? I know there's been some funds and thing. What is your biggest selling point?
I
I
think our
think
biggest, well, I I think we should both hit this one in brief. I think our biggest selling point is that we are the first people to take decentralization to what I consider to be its fallen natural conclusion. A lot of teams have made the mistake of viewing security as something, kind of fixed or a constant, where they either go, yeah, we're good, we're seemingly impenetrable, or no, we got to fix something. Whereas in reality, it's obviously constantly changing and getting more and more difficult, so to speak, each day as people progress in understanding your system if it remains stagnant. So something that we're implementing called the Developer Funding Initiative is what I consider to be one of our main selling points, because we're putting the ability to affect an immediate change upon identification of a platform problem in the hands of the users. So that way, we're exposing them to the downside of security flaws, but also giving them an avenue to affect a change instead of a lot of other platforms. In fact, pretty much every other platform there is, that the users are subject to the downside, but have no way to really change that.
I think
Right.
another thing.
I was just going to say, similar to a security bounty program, I made a video. I don't know if anyone watched it, but there's a lot of security concerns, and I said an exchange, and this is interesting with a decentralized thing, an exchange that engages in a bounty program, meaning if you hack us or if you find a bug, we'll give you money and you can fix it. And that actually is really important because there's a lot of people with talent that are willing to break your stuff. Like I have friends who they can't make anything, but they can break everything. And so putting that in place is really important. And why don't you tell us your point of view on the differentiator of this platform?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the closest competitors are people like, Economy, obviously, and Melonport and, Wings. But I would say that I have nothing against any of those, but a lot of them try to do a lot of things. And we're trying to focus on one specific thing, which I think it can help us create something really strongly and well built, and it limits our focus and it allows us to be effective. And like William's saying, having the ability to change something yourself is really important, and not relying exclusively on, our team to go fix something if a problem does arise. Now, obviously, we're going to do that, but a lot of times, it's necessary for an individual to step in and do that.
Right. And so since the funds are going into the fund, which I think is admirable, and I also appreciate your honesty on the podcast, you're still working things out, but you do have a clear, I think, vision. How far along are you on development and how are you going to make sure that everything is completed? Let's just say I see a lot of sales. They collect X amount, 80% goes to development, and that's that. So if you're reinvesting into the fund, how do you plan to hire the talent, or maybe you have in-house talent and bootstrap to get this running?
Yeah, so we're not putting a date to an ICO yet. We're certainly not ready for that. We're doing exactly, we're building the platform right now. We're trying to get it to work. We're testing it with our own money. We're really focusing on this DFI element of it. And I would say that it would be very premature to announce, hey, we're having an ICO, and because I agree, many of these many projects, very, very, very early stage receive funding, and that can be good or bad. But in our case, we're taking it slow.
So is it fair to say that your plan is to have a product that is at least working with some of the functionality by the time, if you do a sale or whatever you do completes?
Yeah, exactly. We want to have the product to where we think it could work before we do a full-scale ICO.
Well, I have to say, I mean, personal note, I worked in computer sales. The easiest way to sell a computer is to just let the person use it, right? So I have a lot of admiration for groups that want to launch with the working product. Obviously, Bitcoin did that, but I like what you guys are working on, and this obviously this podcast, since there isn't an ICO date, is education. Are you looking for developers? Is there ways to get in touch? Do you have a Slack, a Telegram, and what ways can people in the community that are interested say hi?
Yes, we do have a Slack. We are looking for people that are interested. A few people have already come to us and they're very interested in helping us out, which is great. But yes, anybody can join our Slack. It's on our website at vega.fund. And yeah, find us there, give us an email.
Thank you very much for your time, George K. Van Humison and William Russell, co-founders of Vega Fund. And if you're interested, visit their website, vega.fund. No ICO yet, but looking for people to get involved, and I'm sure there's opportunities if you put in the time.